really straight from the heart. But before I began reading it, probably like most people, I was really skeptical. Because, when we think about Sid Mallya, we think he's the fortunate one, the one that's born with the silver spoon. His life must be great. And why would he be suffering from depression or other mental health issues? And being 50-ish, what can I learn from a 30-year-old? I think that was the biggest thing that I got from the book. And it made me realize a lot of things. First of all, I loved it because it's very, very simply written and it's very easy to read. So it's one of those things that you can actually read, and it's not very heavy, because when you start thinking about mental health and you start thinking about mental health books, you think, oh my God, it's going to be very heavy. But the biggest thing that it made me realize is that mental health issues can affect anyone. Sid, a very, very warm welcome. We're very excited to speak to you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So Sid, I think a lot of people will be asking this question. So who are you now? Because, we are really confused. We have this image of you in our head, and then we read this book and somebody totally different emerges.
Well, I think I'm just an honest person, as the book suggests. I'm just someone who's living their truth and who's at a place where I've done a lot of self-work and, gone through my own journey and experiences, and feel the time is right to share that with the world, and in a hope that maybe it can help someone else.
But tell us about your mental health journey. But there are also a lot of skeptics, and I know that you hate reading all the press, but a lot of people are also claiming that this is a PR stunt book.
No one actually claimed that. I just want to clarify that. It was asked by one person, which was, a little bit disappointing. And it was disappointing because, not that I was sort of surprised to be asked that, but, we have an opportunity here in these interviews to talk about mental health, to talk about the book, and to really potentially help people. So for that sort of question to be asked and to go down that avenue, it was sort of like, oh, okay, come on, like, is this what you want to focus on? Like, we've got this time together. Why would we want to focus on asking me if it's a PR stunt? And as I answered that question, what would I have gained by this if I wanted it to be a PR stunt? I mean, you've read the book.
Not only that, you've been doing Consider for a long time.
Right. I've been doing Consider this for a while. I mean, you've read the book. It's pretty deep stuff. Now, why would someone put themselves through that? There's much quicker ways to, do PR stunts if you want than writing a book. So I think it was disappointing that that was where that person decided to take their question. More so because I think, shouldn't we be celebrating people talking about their mental health rather than trying to always find opportunities to bring people down?
But I would like you to tell us about your mental health journey, because I don't think a lot of people exactly knew what you went through.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I won't give away too much because I want people to buy the book, but, I went through depression in 2016. It coincided with the time when I started a drama school in the UK, and a number of different things were happening all at once. And I think that I was perhaps opened up to feelings and emotions that had been there all along, but because, of the drama school training and everything, I was probably feeling things deeper for the first time. And that's when sort of years worth of emotion and everything started coming out. And, it was then that I was like, it was getting to a place where it was a struggle. Days were not enjoyable, and I was like, well, I want to do something about this. And that's when I started my real journey, like deep diving into my past, to seeing sort of what were the events and everything that I was holding on to that were having an effect on me later on. And that's kind of where we're at. And this book is, I think the other thing is to remember is that this book is not just something that I woke up one fine day and was like, oh, I'm going to write it now. This book is a culmination of years of work to get to a place, first of all, where I was able to notice the things that I've mentioned in the book, but also to be comfortable enough to talk about it.
So one of the big things that you do talk about, and one of the things I think a lot of kids of divorce are struggling from, is what is the impact of divorce? And I know it harangues a lot of parents, and parents really think about this. And when you wrote about that, it really tugged at my heart. And because divorce is becoming so common, are there any thoughts that you would like to share? Because this played a lot on your mind also.
Well, I think that's like, what you just said, it's become so common. And I've talked about divorce, and I've had people say things like, oh, well, it's common, like 1 in 3 people get divorced. And I was like, right, that might be true, but that statistic doesn't make it any easier for the people who've gone through it. Like, just because more people are going through it doesn't mean it's better. And I remember speaking to my therapist about divorce early on, and she said that children from divorce can actually suffer from PTSD. And what, if you're not aware, or if your listeners aren't aware, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Which is most likely you associate it with soldiers that come back from war, if they serve in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they go through experiences which the human body is not designed to experience, and they come back and they suffer from this post-traumatic stress. And I was interested to find out that children from divorce can go through a form of PTSD. And when you look at it like that, you sort of wonder why it's not given more attention.
No, agreed. And did your parents read this book? Because as a parent, you actually wonder what were their thoughts and how did they think they could have possibly handled it better? And how could even parents, because when I read this book, it's something that you say, okay, is there something that we can do? Because it is becoming, like you said, 1 in 3 parents are getting divorced.
I think and that's one of the things that I write in the book, is that it's not just, I think a lot of the time what happens during divorce, and parents focus on the well-being of the children, right? And a lot of the time that perhaps they can neglect their own needs and their own feelings of what they're going through, because it's an abnormal thing. No one gets married with the thought, I'm going to get divorced. So when it happens, and that's why I write in the book that I think that the adequate support should be given to not just children but to the parents as well. My parents my mum's halfway through the book. I think she's very proud of me for writing it. She loves it. I haven't heard from my dad yet, but I think I make it a point, though, in the book, that I think I do say it, and I made it a point to say this, that I just think everyone was doing what they thought was best at the time, right? I don't think anyone went out of their way to do anything wrong or mishandle the situation, but it's kind of like, and that's the point I make in the book, is that how do you handle a situation like that? And that's where I'm like, yeah, and that's where I'm like, that's where I think that if, sadly people are getting divorced, that more kind of, professional advice is given how to best handle a situation like this.
Yeah, and that's something that we are actually only just opening up to, that yes, we need to get professional advice. But your also journey, I think it started to begin because, you're a liquor baron's son. Everybody knows you for Kingfisher, but you gave up drinking, because it's quite intriguing. And the reason I want to delve into that is because, especially here in India, there is a lot of social pressure. And to be part of that cool crowd, to be part of that in crowd, and to be part of that new millennial generation, people feel that they must drink. And I've witnessed it myself. If you don't, because I'm almost a teetotaler, there is a lot of pressure on you that if you are not drinking, you must just stand there with a glass in your hand, because otherwise people will keep bugging you. How do you deal with that? And I see this new trend, especially in the millennials, because they're finding it very difficult to navigate this.
So that's it's interesting. I think that's, yes, it's prevalent in India, but I think that peer pressure in general across the board is something that's prevalent everywhere, right? I think if it's not drinking, it's people are being pushed to do things just to fit in. The clothes they wear, Instagram, putting up pictures. I can guarantee that there's probably a 15-20 year difference between you and me. And when you were in your teens, it was a very different world to when I was in my teens. And the teenagers of today, it's a completely different world to what I experienced if we go 15 years the other way. And, you know, I think some of the pressures that I experienced didn't exist for you. And some of the pressures that the kids of today have to deal with didn't exist for me. Like, you know, I mean, we didn't have to worry about taking a photo and then choosing 25 different filters and editing it and putting it up. So, you know, I think it's not just with drinking. I think the bigger picture, or the bigger message in the book is it's peer pressure in general, right? Which is becoming more problematic the more people put themselves out there. And coming to drinking, I mean, I don't know how right this is, but I believe, though, that the younger generation are actually not drinking as much anymore. Because they're doing drugs instead, which isn't
that, but I'm glad you
which isn't, you know, I mean, it's not smart, but apparently this is what I've heard. Like, statistically, they're not drinking as much. They're doing other forms of escapes, which are less calorific. But you know, I'm not saying go and do that either. I'm a big believer in, and it is hard, this, right? And I have written this in the book. You've got to, at the end of it, do what's best for you. There'll always be people, like I have it all the time. Like, there's one or two people, God, like, I won't drink. They'll be like, why? Just have one. I was like, I have not drunk for 3 years. Why would I have a sip of it today? Like it was, where was I? It was even my grandmother. Like, I think I was in London. Well, I haven't been home for like 2 years. So this was probably December, before the pandemic, and we'd gone to some winter wonderland or something for Christmas, something. She's having mulled wine or something. She's like, oh, have a sip. Have a sip. And I said, Amma, you know, I don't drink. Like what? Do you have one sip? I said, but I was laughing because I mean, obviously, bless her, she's an elderly woman. She doesn't mean anything of it, but that's what I mean. It's as little as, go on, have a sip, have a sip. And as I said in the book, I'm like, if you're a vegetarian, it's like going to a vegetarian, we're going to have a bite of this chicken, You wouldn't do it. So why would you put that pressure on someone who doesn't want to drink? Like, if someone doesn't want to drink, they don't want to drink. And in fact, if you are going out of your way to force someone else to drink, you better have a long look in the mirror at yourself and figure out what it is that's lacking in you that you think is going to get fixed by this person drinking, because it's probably an insecurity you're harboring it yourself rather than actually something that you've got aimed at the other person.
So true, so true. See, I've never felt that I needed alcohol to have fun, but somehow everybody else felt that I could not have fun without alcohol. I so agree with you.
That's the same with me. For me, I got to a point where I was like, because I would stop drinking it's not like I was, you know, I'd stop drinking for months on end, and I could stay up till 6 a.m. without a drop of booze. And then I was like, well, then what am I getting out of this? And that's kind of like where I went. But I think to all of your listeners on this, it's like, I am not saying, I get it. Peer pressure is hard. It is difficult. And it's funny because I did consider this episode on it, right? And so people got angry at me because of this. They were like, they're like, but why? Fine, it might be easy for you, but what about peer pressure? And I'm like, listen, what do you mean easy for me? I am not a superhero. I don't have any superpowers. I just decided to take a stand and ownership of my own life. You all have the right to do the same thing. If you're not willing to exercise that right, don't blame the people who have taken the stand, right?
No, but Sidhartha, I'll push back on that, Sidhartha, because of the fact that I, being the age I am, and I can tell you how much peer pressure I get. So I can imagine a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. I'm sorry, Sid, to come back on this because this is such a big issue, but we will.
No, but I agree with you. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm agreeing with you that the peer pressure is there. But I'm also saying that at the end of it, unless someone is going to tie you to a chair and force feed the alcohol in your mouth, everything ends up being a choice that starts with you. And no matter how much pressure, people have to remember this, no matter how many people tell you to do something, you still have the chance to say no.
And I'm hoping you're going to make teetotaling cool. So that's my personal.
No, and I won't say on this. Can I just say on that? Because I think it's important to talk about these things that we're talking about. This is that, again, in the book, I don't say that drinking is bad.
Yeah.
And I will never say that people should become teetotal. I'm just saying, do what works for you. You know what? If you come back from work and you unwind with a glass of wine every night because that's your thing and it helps you, then go and do it. If you go out on the weekends and you want to do what works for you. I'm just saying is that if it becomes a problem in some way, shape or form, and it's having more of an adverse effect on you than positive, then you got to think about, okay, what am I doing here?
I love this from your Instagram, and I want to talk about this and how people constantly have opinions about everything we do. And some of the things people say and the endless judgments. And especially now, because you've written this book, you're all over on the press again. And people are picking up stuff that happened 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Everything is coming back into the limelight. I mean, how do you manage with that? Because I mean, you also, I think, especially they brought up the thing about Quantico and you not getting a role. So they're bringing back everything and rehashing your past. And why did it happen? And why did it not happen? Because this is one thing, again, we are so worried about people's opinions.
Yeah, it's the Quantico thing. Again, I think it was the same person who asked me about the PR stunt. I think it was all the same one.
Wow, this person has really made it all over the
which
news.
was kind of like, oh, okay, like we're here to talk about this book, like, but and again, it was just more to do with, I think, look, we're in an age where things never go, right? You know, since for all young people out there, be careful what you put out into the world because it's there now forever. But I don't mind, like, I just think that we should allow people to change and understand that we are all constantly evolving and changing. And don't have preconceived notions against people. Let people change, like let them be who they are. And I just, you know, for me with this book, I think the frustrating thing is you can talk about what you want, but I'm like, look, I've done something good here for society in this book. Let's focus the column inches on that, you know, instead of writing articles about something that happened 7 years ago. And like I did, that I'd even forgotten about. Like, since that Quantico audition, I think I've probably done 200 auditions. Like, it's not a big deal in that. It's just another thing you do.
Yeah, no, I mean, but the question I want to ask is more about the opinions. And because this is the one that all of us struggle with, especially here, log kya kahenge? We're so worried about what people will say and how to deal with the negative opinions that people would have of us. And we don't even know that they're negative. It's just that in our mind, we're just so worried about the opinions people will make us.
I think, and there's a whole section on this in the book, right?
Yes.
Is that opinions are going to always be there. Opinions are not the problem. It's the importance and the value you give to either the opinion or to the person who's giving the opinion. That's where it becomes problematic. And I think what I write in the book is it's not about stopping the opinions, because you can't. As you said, they're always going to exist from everyone, from every walk of life. Opinions are always going to be there. What you can do is start discerning, okay, whose opinion is it worth listening to, and whose due is it, as they say, in one ear and out the other.
No, I mean, hats off to you that you're able.
And again, it's not easy.
It's not, because like I said, we still suffer from it. But what I really liked, and the best part of the book, was actually you looking to find your own path. That it was a very easy decision. And when people think about it, to go and say, okay, let me take over the family business, kind of a settled life. But you were like, no, this is not what it is for me. There is something else. There's another quest. Possibly there's another path for me. And what was even more encouraging was that your dad did not make you feel guilty. Everyone else did, especially if I remember from the book, but your dad did not make you feel guilty. And because this is the other thing that drives us crazy. One is, of course, other people's opinion. The second one is the guilt that drives us crazy. But I also love the fact that you were able to say, okay, I can walk away from something and choose a more difficult path. Please talk to us about that.
Yeah, and as I say, like, I was fortunate that I had that support from him, from my dad, which can't have been easy for him to have your only child, well, your only son. He has two daughters as well, being like, "Oh, I've got nothing to do in the business anymore. I want to be out." So I was fortunate to have that support, but again, like as I said, everyone had their opinion on it. Everyone still has their opinion on it, and that's as we've discussed, is that's always going to be there. It's just trying to navigate those opinions, and in that situation, listen to the only ones that are important.
But I felt that that was also a big part, finding the purpose and finding and having your own identity was part of the self work you talk about. And I want to come back to the last question about self work and what exactly is self work. Because I felt that even for you, purpose was very, very important.
Yeah, I think self-work is different for everyone, but I think of purpose, I'd say self-work is finding yourself. So many of us think that we are living our authentic lives, and we know ourselves when we very rarely do. And self-work is discovery, right? It's really taking a deep dive into yourself, and looking at the parts of you that you want to change, or might be looking at the things that are giving you trouble today and trying to figure out where they stemmed from, and doing what you can to move forwards and to really take ownership of your life and live your life in the way that you want to live it. And I say in the book that it's important to split the word up, two words into two bits: self and work. And self obviously means it's for the self, it's for you, it's for no one else. What works for you might not work for me. What works for me might not work for the next person. So therefore, it's important to do things that work for you, and take the best bits that you find, discard the bits that don't work, and make a system that works for you. So that's the self part. And the second part is work. Like it is
But it's
work.
hard.
Like,
It's not easy.
it's not easy, and it's going to be painful. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to feel all these things. And if one can learn to stick at it, like with anything, right? It's like going to the gym. Like, if you want to lose weight or you want to get into shape, or when you go there and you're like, oh, I'm in so much pain. Well, if you keep sticking at it, it gets easier. And that's the same thing with self-work. You've got to remember that it is work at the end of the day. It's not some magic cure that you suddenly like, oh, well, finally. It doesn't work like that. It's an ongoing process. And you've really got to commit to it.
One of the big things is still the stigma. I mean, of course, I've lived in the US. It's definitely a little bit better there, but here there's still a lot of stigma associated just with the fact that you say that you're mentally unwell, or mental wellness is picking up, but it's still not mainstream. People are still afraid to go to a therapist. What would you like to say to them? Because this is something that is a huge issue, but we're not ready to accept it.
I think I think that's why we're having conversations like this, right? And this is why I've written this book, is so we can all do our part to promote the conversation around it and normalize it. And, I would say to anyone who's suffering, don't feel afraid to seek help. That's one of the main messages in the book, is please don't feel afraid to seek help. And you got a toothache, you go to a dentist. You feel sick, you go to the doctor. Why wouldn't you go to the specialist to look after your mental well-being? And I find what's so funny is that, India, we are the motherland of spirituality and well-being. Like, we are the motherland.
Yes.
All of this stuff in the West has come from the East, right? Most of it has come from India, China, these sorts of places. And mental well-being and spirituality are not different. It's all oneness. What is spirituality and wellness? It's looking after yourself, right? It's well-being. So I always find it quite fascinating how we are such a country of people flock to India to have these big, like, life-changing experiences. Yet within India, someone wants to have a life-changing experience by seeing a therapist, and it's seen as taboo.
No, it's a big I think path that we have to cross, because the stigma, especially now in COVID times, it's become very dangerous, especially for women and for youngsters, as a lot of people are suffering from isolation, a lot of the stuff that you've spoken about in your book. So these issues are very, very real. The helplines are going, I mean, people can't manage them because there's
Let
so
me
many.
let me say on that what you mentioned. Like, this is something that I've been speaking to a lot of people, and they said, look, the real pandemic is not the coronavirus. You know, there will be vaccinations and everything that we will manage that. The real pandemic is mental health, and there is no vaccination against mental health. And we need to really start. It's not the COVID that's going to leave repercussions. It's the mental health issues that people suffered because of COVID that are going to leave the long-lasting effects and repercussions. And I don't know how true this is, right? Again, so I'm not saying this with any authority, but I did one of these Instagram lives with a therapist in India during COVID. And she told me that there's, in the whole of India, which is a country of what, we 1.4 billion at the moment, 1.3 billion. There are only 4,000 licensed therapists in the entire country.
I don't know the number, but the ratio of therapists to actual people is very, very low.
And even if we take, if you separate rural India and even take the big cities, it's still a ridiculously low amount. And, you know, I think that not only do we need to normalize speaking to a therapist, from my understanding, looking at a statistic like that, we need to normalize that going into a career of therapy and psychology is also an acceptable career path.
No, very well said. Any words of caution that you would have for people? Because, you know, when they are going through self-work, like you described it, it is not an easy process.
Yeah, I'd say just have compassion.
Be prepared.
Be prepared, but also take time. Like I can give you advice from my own mistakes. You know, I don't know, a mistake isn't a mistake if you learn from it, right? And you're able to teach from it. So I was one of these, reading these books, Eckhart Tolle, Power Now, Michael Singer, all of this stuff, right? And I was like, oh, I should be fixed. But then the same thoughts would come back, the same fears and anxieties. I was like, but why are they still there? I've done all of this work. Isn't the whole point to stop all of this? And then eventually I learned, I was like, this is not about stopping anything. This is just about learning how to better manage the same things which are going to continue happening as part of life. So don't expect miracles, A. And B, I read The Power of Now, and, you know, Eckhart Tolle says, do this, 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 and this. And then I would beat myself up for not being able to follow what he was saying to a T. And then I realized, I was like, listen, that book was written by someone at a very specific point in their life based on what they were going through and their experiences. So unless you are living the exact same life as Eckhart Tolle, you can't expect to follow everything down to a T. Of course, the guiding overall principles can be applied to life, but don't expect this. So be willing to be flexible with this process. Take the bits that work from Eckhart Tolle's book, take the bits that work from different books, and apply it to your life in the way that's applicable to you where you are right now. And I'd say that was my biggest learning. Excuse the yawn. It's 7:30.
Very early there. Sorry about that.
But it's I'd say you've just got to do what works for you. Like, that was my biggest bit of advice I give anyone who's doing self-work is A, stick at it, commit, and B, don't be afraid to do what works for you.
I want to go back to that question. How long did your self-work take? Because people need to realize that this is not an overnight journey.
No. I mean, I started, properly looking at it in 2016. And it's still an ongoing process, still an ongoing, you know, process. I'm by no means the finished product. And in the end of the book, I actually quote Winston Churchill, where I said, now this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. So that's where I feel like I'm at, is that I'm probably at the end of the beginning of my journey, and it's a life's work, this, right, isn't it? So, but you need to start somewhere.
No, I'm so glad because, like I said, I mean, I think your series that you started on Instagram that is giving hope to a lot of people. If we see more and more people talking about it, hopefully it will become mainstream and it will become, like you said, like a toothache. It is not going to be something that we say, oh my God, because we are still in that kind of phase where don't know exactly how to deal with mental health. So, any last closing words you would like to say before we end for today?
I just say that I think we all have a role to play, and together let's try and, you know, it's like with anything in life, right? Anything that needed to change in society, any meaningful change didn't happen overnight. It took years of work, and it took years of people standing up for what they believed in and talking about it and normalizing things. And it's got to be the same thing with mental health. The more we can all collectively talk about it, the stigma is not going to end overnight, but we all have a part to play in ending that stigma. Maybe it's not for your generation, maybe it's not even my generation, maybe it's for the next generation, but we all have a part to play in ending the stigma. And the best way to do that is to start talking about it and remembering that it's okay, A, to suffer from feelings of mental health, because we are all human, and B, it is okay to seek help.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. And I'm hoping that this message of yours, we can reach as many people as possible.
Yeah, no, and thank you very much for giving me, you know, I have to say as well, giving me this opportunity and this platform to talk, not just about the book, but mental health in general, because, you know, it's conversations like this that are gonna hopefully inspire others to start talking more about it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.